Continue. Yep. All right. G'day, listeners. Unfortunately, I'll take it again. G'day, listeners. Unfortunately, here in Melbourne, we're in lockdown again. But joining me in the studio is my co-host Luke Herbert on the 3 Feet Radio Show. G'day, Luke.
G'day, Ben. And this is the perfect day for what we're doing. We've got the typical Invercargill weather. We have hail showers and cold. So this is a good day to be indoors with an exciting range of guests, Ben.
We most certainly do. It's nice. It's okay weather here in Melbourne. And joining us from her farm is former Australian captain in Liz Ellis. G'day, Liz.
Gentlemen, it's great to be here. It's a little bit overcast here today, but it's not too bad. I do live on the Northern Rivers in northern New South Wales, just a bit inland from Byron. So really any day is a good day to be here.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on. First of all, to get things going, Liz, COVID-19 has thrown up a raft of challenges and issues. How have you been coping in the situation, as you do have 2 kids too?
I do, and you know, my kids are at school and preschool today, so we're not in lockdown in New South Wales. And I'm going to admit it, I actually really enjoyed the first lockdown we had. I don't know that I'd cope with the second lockdown, but that first lockdown, like I travel so much that to be able to be at home with my kids for a couple of months was fantastic. And the first week of homeschooling went well. Evelyn got up and was sitting at the office in front of the computer at 8:30 every morning the first week in her school uniform, no less. That was great. That lasted a week. The second week, the school uniform was left in the cupboard. The motivation dropped. She was sitting in front of the computer at 10. And the third week, I just said, don't worry about it. We're just going to go walking and exploring. And so we did. You know, we've got a couple of 100 acres up here, so we can isolate on the property and still have plenty of places to go. We've got a little half netball court. We've got a swimming pool. The weather was good enough to swim still. So that first lot of COVID, I loved. Since we've been sort of back and out into the real world, I'm back travelling. So I'm travelling to and from Sydney every couple of weeks. And I get a bit anxious about it, I've got to admit. I've been a mask wearer. It's not compulsory, but I'm a chronic asthmatic. I had pneumonia over summer, which was a bit of a hangover of the bushfires that we had. And God, don't the bushfires feel like years ago? So I wasn't well at the start of the year. So I'm a bit anxious about travelling. But, you know, I feel very fortunate. I've got, you know, we're in New South Wales. We're not in lockdown. We just have to adhere to social distancing. And, you know, I've got netball to look forward to in a couple of weeks.
And just speaking of netball, there's been a couple of rule changes on both sides of the Tasman, and in the Suncorp Super Netball League is probably where the most controversy is. We've got the 2-point goal coming, but in the ANZ Premiership, they've actually shortened the quarters to accommodate for the number of games in what was thought to be quite a compact space. So what do you think of those 2 rule changes? They're definitely quite different.
Oh, they are very different. I'll go to the ANZ Championship one first. I think that was just smart. That's just athlete management. And if you're going to have a condensed season, which we certainly are here, you know, netball players can go into, say, a World Cup and do 8 or 9 games in 10 or 14 days, you know, and back in my first World Cup, it was even more condensed than that. So you can do it. And at Commonwealth Games, you do it. But to be able to do it over a long period of time, over a 6 or 10 or 12-week season, I think that athlete management side of things is really smart. And you don't lose too much. Netball's a pretty fast-paced game. So I thought that was a smart move for the ANZ Champs. For Super Netball, there's 3 new rules. There's the rolling subs, which I love. Although from a view, it's going to be a bit hairy trying to identify who's on and who's off and all that sort of palaver. So that's, you know, I think, you know, a great innovation, but there's going to be some issues around just trying to get used to it from a commentary point of view. Extra time, fantastic. I hate draws. The super shot, I like the idea of the super shot. I'm looking forward to seeing how it works. I get that there was some angst around it not being sort of, there was no consultation done, but yeah, I love the idea of the super shot, and I actually can't wait to see, you know, who pulls it off. And I suspect that the teams who do it best are going to be that new rule are going to be the ones who actually take no notice of it and just play their normal game.
And Liz, we've had the teams start to be in isolation in preparation for moving into their hubs in Queensland. As you would know yourself, even though you're New South Wales, Netball Queensland's had a range of well-documented administrative and player pathway issues, along with some other things in the past. Do you feel that Queensland hosting the SSM may give these areas and other areas for netball in Queensland a positive shot in the arm?
Look, I don't know. I think they're two very different things. I think that, this has been a real a government sort of thing. I know that there are a number of governments who came to the table with financial packages to host Super Netball. So there was the Western Australian government, the New South Wales government, the Queensland government. I think the Queensland government was really aggressive because they need that sort of stuff happening within their tourism industry. And it's a great way to showcase your tourism industry by supporting a local sporting competition. So, you could see the look on Anastasia Palaszczuk's face when she announced it, that she was desperate to, get it happening. So I think the administrative side of things, I'm probably not in a position to comment on that. I'm about to chair a panel that's doing a state of the game review for netball in Australia. So I'm really in a listening mode at the moment rather than sort of offering any sort of meaningful opinion on that. Hopefully we can sort of hear about any issues that are happening in any state association. We want to be able to listen to all levels of the game, so from grassroots right through to the elite. And I know we're going to get some issues coming up at all levels about the way the game is run. And hopefully by the end of it, we'll have a meaningful sort of analysis and opinion on that to be able to deliver.
I suppose if I was just going to briefly add my take on the Suncorp rule changes, to borrow from Meatloaf, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But let's just stick with the Suncorp League for a moment. And Ben and I were discussing this off air. But what are the broadcast arrangements for you, the commentators and crew, Channel 9 for the league? Because normally you'd be having the games in each state where the teams are.
So what are we going to do?
Yeah, are you still having the same rotation of commentators? Like Sue Gordian, for instance, is based in Perth as an example. So does she then come to Queensland, go into isolation for, I presume, 2 weeks, and then?
Oh no, I don't think the Perth. Yeah, I don't know that the Perth players have to isolate because WA and Queensland have open borders. So Sue is an assistant coach with Fever, so she will travel with them. So which I think will mean she's available for commentary. I think that there will be a couple of games in New South Wales, so that means that Coxie is available for that. Hopefully she'll be able to pick up those sort of stuff. And then I live near the Queensland border, so I suspect I'm going to be smashed. But to be honest, we don't really know how that's going to work. There's a whole lot of logistics that are happening as we speak almost that are yet to be put in place, and there's lots of moving parts. So Keely Devery is the head of netball for Channel 9. She, every time I speak to her, she sounds frantic. I think she probably needs a good lie down and maybe a holiday on the beach with a glass of gin at the end of all this. So, she's been working on rosters for months, looking at all the different permutations that you can have. So I don't quite know yet what's going to happen with the whole competition in Queensland, but I think it probably rules out some of the Victorian commentators because unless they're prepared to, quarantine for 2 weeks, that's an expensive argument. So it's highly likely to be, Laura Geitz, as a Queenslander, myself who lives close to the border, Gordy, and maybe Coxie, and I don't really know who else. It depends. But if I have to commentate 56 games, I'll commentate 56 games. I'm not making anywhere near the sacrifice that other people are making to get this season underway.
And Liz, there was a bit of banter recently on Sports Sunday that you're on sometimes on Channel 9, basically saying that you're too regal to have to appear in studio and you just appear via Zoom. How do you respond to those comments?
You can just call me Queen Elizabeth.
Okay, is that all?
Yeah, no, that's allowed. No, actually, funny. At the start of COVID, Channel 9 actually just pulled the pin on any non-essential domestic travel. So clearly I was non-essential and I was told to stay home. I do suffer massively from FOMO, fear of missing out. So I went to our producer and I said, please, can I do something? So she gave me a little segment called Heroes and Villains, which I do regularly on the show anyway. So I dial in for 5 minutes. But it's been interesting. Lots of people are telling me they're looking at us from the farm, and I try and get a little bit of farm action, a bit of cow action in the background. My kids Austin, my little 4-year-old, has accidentally turned up. Well, he says it was accidental, turned up in the background of the shot. Evelyn she's 8. One of her teachers has challenged her to turn up in the background, but she's a bit too shy. So, look, I am a bit regal. I am a bit full of myself, Ben. So I prefer to work in my pajamas as opposed to get on a plane and turn up to work. Yes, you've got me.
Oh, you won't be earning any frequent flyer miles, but just speaking of frequent flyer miles, I think we'll switch to international netball here. And if the proposed travel hub or so-called Trans-Tasman bubble doesn't occur between Australia and New Zealand, where do you see international netball from an Australian point of view? Do you think the Diamonds could play an Australian men's team and look at playing a Suncorp League All-Stars team again like they did for the Bushfire Relief match?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of things that they can do. You want the Diamonds playing. We're still waiting to see who's going to coach the Diamonds, and I think they need to get that in place fairly quickly. We've already lost nearly a year since the last World Cup in terms of preparation, because nothing has really happened. So we've only got a couple of years now to the Commonwealth Games and then the next World Cup. So I'd love to see the Diamonds be able to, if we can't get that Trans-Tasman travel bubble going, and try saying that 5 times fast. It'd be great to be able to look at some really innovative ways to get the Diamonds some match play. That Bushfire match was really interesting. The Diamonds won it in the canter, but towards the end, the international team really started gelling. So if you picked an international team from Super Netball and gave them time to work together, I think they'd be fairly tough to beat. They become a little bit formidable. So, there's that option. A game against the Australian men's team would be great. It'd be really interesting. And I'd like to, I'd actually like to, in this, I mentioned the review that I'm doing, I'd love to hear about men's netball in that review. I think that there's probably an argument to join up, netball Australia and men's netball, and perhaps a test match might be a good way to get that underway. I don't know. So, everything's on the table, but I think from a Diamonds point of view, there's a few options if we don't get a Trans-Tasman test at the end of this year.
Having a test match between the Diamonds and the Australian men, I reckon it would be great just for PR as well. We spoke to Courtney Tyree on our show last week, Liz, and she said the amount of PR and promotion for men's netball when they did that in New Zealand, it was huge.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, right? And it's interesting. It's not, everyone loves Australia and New Zealand, but to be able to go out to market with something really novel, I think is a good thing. And there's an appetite at the moment. People want something to watch. So absolutely you could provide people with that, and it's a great opportunity. There's an old saying which I've heard so many gazillion times through this last 6 months is you never waste a good crisis. And so this is an opportunity to have a look and see what's out there and see what people want to watch and what they're interested in.
And just going a bit longer term, how do you see the future of the Quad Series? Do you see it moving to Australia and New Zealand with 2 Pacific Island nations thrown in? So keeping it more, I don't want to use the term localised because the distances involved in the Pacific, but perhaps more regional after COVID?
Yeah, I don't know. And I think that's something that we're all going to have to grapple with and come to the table with an open mind. I think that the only thing we know for certain is that things are never going to be the same in terms of our entire lives. And one of those things that's going to be affected is sport, from the Olympics through to, we're supposed to have heard by now what's going to happen with the men's T20 Cricket World Cup that was supposed to be held later this year here. And then you look at the international model for netball, does that have to change? And I think there's so much talent in the Pacific that it's something that could absolutely happen. So, and the Pacific players who play in New Zealand, there's some brilliant talent there too. So perhaps it becomes an opportunity to develop that regional talent. I don't know. It's something that's, both Netball Australia and Netball New Zealand in particular are going to have to work through.
A bit of a light harder one for you, Liz. Have you discovered any new skills or talents while spending more time at home on the farm?
Nah, not at all. I don't have time for that, Ben. I've got 2 bloody kids, and all I've discovered is that I am an excellent farmhand. So,
Really?
my husband is a cattle farmer, and I've, like this morning, I spent the whole morning bucketing grain. You know, we get all the leftover grain from a local brewery after they brew their beers, and so the grain comes in these huge tubs, and I have to bucket them into tubs for the cows and end up covered in grain. So so I haven't really discovered it. Like, I can't say I learned to juggle, or I can't say that I did art or learned to I don't know, an instrument. I kept the children fed and alive. I discovered that I have more patience than perhaps I could. I will say, though, my vegetable garden is looking spectacular. It tends to go in fits and starts, and because I've been at home, at the moment, I've got a vegetable garden full of brassica. So broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage. What else have I got? Kale. I've got lots of greens. Oh, I've got heaps of peas. I'm even growing carrots this time. So I'm having a go at carrots, onions, potatoes, snow peas. So that's probably been the crowning triumph of COVID in terms of, I haven't learned any new skills, but I've gone very hard on my garden, and my entire garden looks fairly spectacular at the moment.
So we've got Farmer Wants a Wife starting on Sunday, Liz. Maybe some of those girls on that show could take a leaf out of your book and actually pick up some skills and actually, hold up their end of the relationship.
Maybe they could just turn up here and help out.
They could, couldn't they? Have you thought about that?
Try not to think about polygamy with my husband. So, it's
no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking more about them helping on the farm. Not at all.
Oh, that'd be nice, actually, to have a bit of help on the farm. It's not a particularly huge farm, but it'd be good. I have to say, like, I'm a city girl, grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, and I do often laugh at the fact that I get around in my work boots and my high-vis, because, my husband buys me high-vis shirts to wear on the farm, and most days I look like I'm filthy, I get dirty, but I love it. We've got cattle, and they're really quiet, so you can hand feed them. We've got chooks. So yeah, I love my farm life, and I actually, my husband and I get along well. We enjoy working together, and he probably enjoyed a lot more if I did, as I was told, in terms of the farm. But hey, I've never been shy of having an opinion on anything.
All right, Liz, thanks very much for joining us today. It's been quite a long time between drinks, and bring on Suncorp Super Netball. Not long to go now.
Just a couple of sleeps, hey? How excitement. Thank you, guys.